Celebrity culture, we destroy what we worship. The commercial exploitation of Michael Jackson's death was orchestrated by the corporate forces that rendered Jackson insane. Jackson, robbed of his childhood and surrounded by vultures that preyed on his fears and weaknesses, was so consumed by self-loathing, he carved his African-American face into a Caucasian death mask. He hid his apparent pedophilia behind a Peter Pan illusion of eternal childhood. He could not disentangle his public and his private self. He became a commodity, a product, one to be sold, used, and manipulated. He was infected by the moral nihilism and personal disintegration that is at the core of our corporate culture. And his fantasies of eternal youth, delusions of majesty, and desperate, disfiguring quests for physical transformation were an expression of our own yearning. He was a reflection of us in the extreme. His memorial service, a variety show with a coffin, had an average of 31.1 million television viewers. It was the final episode in the long-running Michael Jackson series. And the stories that enthrall us are real-life stories, early fame, wild success, and then a long, bizarre, and macabre, emotional train wreck. O.J. Simpson offered a tamer version of the same plot. So does Tiger Woods and Britney Spears. Jackson, by the end, was heavily in debt and had weathered a $22 million out-of-court settlement to Jordy Chandler, as well as 7 counts of child sexual abuse and 2 counts of administering an intoxicating agent in order to commit a felony. Jackson reflected our own physical and psychological disintegration, especially with many Americans struggling with overwhelming debt, loss of status, and deep personal confusion.
Hello, what's up family? Welcome back to my YouTube space. I am the Kenyan Beast. Welcome to my channel here where we talk unapologetic about black culture, black truth, and the system that try to erase our stories and our history. Now, today's message is clear but deep. White America has profited a lot from black struggle and black suffering, black pain. From the very beginning, they have built an empire on our backs. Let's take it there real quick because today's video it's heavy. Slavery wasn't just a moral failure, it was an economic machine. By 1860, the value of enslaved black people in America was higher than all the factories, railroads, and banks in the country combined. We were the wealth. We were the one who built the wealth. We were the one who brought America to where it is. Cotton plantation powered Wall Street. Our unpaid labor made America a global economic force. Then after slavery came Jim Crow, convict leasing, redlining. The system didn't stop. It just shifted gears. They drained our labor, our neighborhoods, our culture, while protecting their wealth, their suburbs, their institutions. And today, it is the same. 400 years, 100 years down the line, it is the same energy. Our pain is still a product, our culture is still capital, and white America is still cashing in. A professor once broke this down, a white professor. In this powerful speech, he used Michael Jackson as an example and more celebrities. And once you hear this, you can't unsee the pattern. I want us to break this down all the way down. But before we do that, I want you to listen to this video of this professor. He's talking about how America has enjoyed the pain or profited from the pain and struggles of black Americans. I know you'll find something useful on this video. So let's stick here, watch the video until to the end, and then I'll come back with my commentary shortly.
Celebrity culture has taught us almost unconsciously to generate interior personal screenplays, and we have learned ways of speaking and thinking that grossly disfigure the way we relate to the world and those around us. Neil Gabler, who has written wisely about this, argues that celebrity culture is not a convergence of consumer culture and religion, so much as a hostile takeover of religion by consumer culture. Celebrity culture licenses a dark voyeurism into other people's humiliation, pain, weakness, and betrayal. Education, building community, honesty, transparency, and sharing are qualities that will see you ridiculed and voted off any reality show. Fellow competitors for prize money and a chance for fleeting fame elect to disappear the unwanted. And celebrities that can no longer generate publicity, good or bad, vanish. Life, these shows teach, is a brutal world of unadulterated competition and a constant quest for notoriety and attention. And our self-exaltation permits the humiliation of those who oppose us. Those who lose deserve to be erased. Those who fail, those who are deemed ugly, ignorant, or poor are belittled and mocked. Human beings are used, betrayed, and discarded in a commodity culture, which is pretty much the story of Jackson's life. The cult of the self, which Jackson embodied, dominates our culture. This cult has within it the classic traits of psychopaths: superficial charm, grandiosity and self-importance, a need for constant stimulation, a penchant for lying, deception, and manipulation, and the incapacity for remorse or guilt. Jackson, from his phony marriages to the portraits of himself dressed as royalty, to his insatiable hunger for new toys, to his questionable relationships with young boys, had all these qualities. And this is also the ethic promoted by corporations. It is the ethic of unfettered capitalism. It is the misguided belief that personal style and personal advancement, mistaken for individualism, are the same as democratic equality. It is the celebration of image over substance. We have a right in the cult of the self to get whatever we desire. We can do anything, even belittle and destroy those around us, including our friends, to make money, to be happy, and to become famous. Once fame and wealth are achieved, they become their own justification, their own morality, and how one gets there is irrelevant. And it is this perverted ethic that gave us Wall Street bankers and investment houses that willfully trashed the global economy, stole money from tens of millions of small shareholders who had bought stock in these corporations for retirement or college. And the heads of these corporations, like the winners on a reality television program who lied and manipulated others to succeed, walked away with hundreds of millions of dollars in bonuses and compensation. The ethic of Wall Street is the ethic of celebrity. But the tantalizing illusions offered by our consumer culture are vanishing as we head towards collapse. The jobs we are shedding are not coming back, as Lawrence Summers tacitly acknowledges when he talks of a jobless recovery. The travails of the poor are rapidly becoming the travails of the middle class, especially as unemployment insurance runs out. And class warfare, once buried under the happy illusion that we were all going to enter an age of prosperity with unfettered capitalism, is returning with a vengeance. In his book, Democracy Incorporated, Sheldon Wolin, who taught political philosophy at Berkeley and later at Princeton, uses the phrase inverted totalitarianism to describe our political system. Inverted totalitarianism, unlike classical totalitarianism, does not revolve around a demagogue or a charismatic leader. It finds its expression in the anonymity of the corporate state. It purports to cherish democracy, patriotism, and the Constitution, while manipulating internal levers to subvert and thwart the democratic process. Political candidates are elected in popular votes by citizens, but are ruled by armies of corporate lobbyists. A corporate media controls nearly everything we read, watch, or hear, and imposes a bland uniformity of opinion. In classical totalitarian regimes such as Nazi fascism or Soviet communism, economics was subordinate to politics. Under inverted totalitarianism, the reverse is true, Wolin writes. Economics dominates politics, and with that domination comes different forms of ruthlessness. The Obama brand offers us an image that appears radically individualistic and new. This image inoculates us from seeing that the old engines of corporate power and the vast military-industrial complex continue to plunder the country. Brand Obama is about being happy consumers. We are entertained. We feel hopeful. But like all branded products spun out from the manipulative world of corporate advertising, we are being duped into doing and supporting a lot of things that are not in our interest. A few weeks before Obama won the presidential elections, Obama beat Nike, Apple, Coors, and Zappos to win the Association of National Advertisers' top annual award, Marketer of the Year. What for all our faith and hope has the Obama brand given us? His administration has spent, lent, or guaranteed $12.8 trillion in taxpayer dollars to Wall Street and insolvent banks in a doomed effort to reinflate the bubble economy. Brand Obama has allocated nearly $1 trillion in defense-related spending and the continuation of our doomed imperial project in Iraq, where military planners estimate that between 50 to 70,000 troops will remain for the next 15 to 20 years. And Brand Obama has expanded the war in Afghanistan, including the use of drones sent on cross-border bombing runs into Pakistan that have left over 700 civilians dead since Obama took office. Brand Obama has refused to ease restrictions so workers can organize, and because of pressure from the for-profit healthcare industry, refuses to consider single-payer, not-for-profit healthcare for all Americans. And Brand Obama will not prosecute the Bush administration for war crimes, including the use of torture, and has refused to dismantle Bush's secrecy laws or restore habeas corpus. Corporations which control our politics no longer produce products that are different, but brands that are different. And Brand Obama does not threaten the core of the corporate state any more than did Brand George W. Bush. The decline of American empire began long before the current economic meltdown or the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. It began before the first Gulf War or Ronald Reagan. It began when we shifted, in the words of the Harvard historian Charles Mayer, from an empire of production to an empire of consumption. By the end of the Vietnam War, when the costs of the war ate away at Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, and domestic oil production began its steady, inexorable decline, we saw our country transformed from one that primarily produced to one that primarily consumed. We started borrowing to maintain a level of consumption as well as an empire we could no longer afford. We began to use force, especially in the Middle East, to feed our insatiable thirst for cheap oil. And the bill is now due. America's most dangerous enemies are not Islamic radicals, but those who sold us the perverted ideology of free market capitalism and globalization. They have dynamited the very foundations of our society. In the 17th century, these speculators would have been hung. Today they run the government and consume billions in taxpayer subsidies. It was Bill Clinton who led the Democratic Party to the corporate watering trough. Clinton argued that the party could ditch labor unions, no longer a source of votes or power, as a political ally. Workers, he insisted, would vote Democratic anyway. They had no choice. It was better, Clinton argued, to take corporate money and do corporate bidding. By the 1990s, the Democratic Party, under Clinton's leadership, had virtual fundraising parity with the Republicans, and today the Democrats get more. The legislation demanded by corporations, including the North American Free Trade Agreement, thrust a knife into the back of the American working class. NAFTA was peddled by the Clinton White House as an opportunity to raise incomes and prosperity of the citizens of the United States, Canada, and Mexico. We were told it would staunch Mexican immigration. But NAFTA, which took effect in 1994, reversed every one of Clinton's predictions. Once the Mexican government lifted price supports on corn and beans grown by Mexican farmers, those farmers had to compete with the huge agribusinesses in the United States, and many were swiftly bankrupt. At least 2 million Mexican farmers have been driven off their land since 1994, and guess where many of them went? This desperate flight of poor Mexicans into the United States is now being exacerbated by large-scale factory closures along the border, as manufacturers pack up and leave Mexico for China. NAFTA was great if you were a corporation. It was a disaster if you were a worker. And we are now getting a taste of Clinton's draconian welfare reform bill signed in 1996 as tens of millions of people face the prospect of losing their unemployment benefits and attempting to survive on the $143 a month you receive from welfare. It was the Clinton administration led by Summers which ripped down the firewalls that had been established by the 1933 Glass-Steagall Act, designed to prevent the kind of meltdown we are now experiencing. Glass-Steagall established the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. It set in place banking reforms to stop speculators from hijacking the financial system. With Glass-Steagall demolished and the passage of NAFTA, the Democrats tumbled gleefully into bed with corporations and Wall Street speculators. And many of the architects of this deregulation, economists such as Summers, have come back to serve corporate interests in the Obama White House. The cost of our empire of illusion is not being paid for by corporate titans. It is being paid for on the streets of our inner cities, in former manufacturing towns, and in depressed rural enclaves. Human beings are not commodities. They are not goods. Their misery is not morally excusable because of the demands of the market. They grieve and suffer and feel despair. They lose their dignity with their jobs, their sense of self-worth. Human beings, not corporations, raise children and maintain communities. And the growing class divide is not understood by complicated sets of statistics or the utopian faith in unregulated globalization. It is understood in the eyes of a man or woman who is no longer making enough money to live with dignity and hope. The assault on the American working class, an assault that has devastated members of my own family in the former mill towns in the state of Maine, shows no sign of abatement. In the past 3 years, nearly 1 in 5 U.S. workers was laid off, and among workers laid off from full-time work, roughly 1/4 were earning $40,000 a year. There's been a Weimarization of the American working class, and the assault on the middle class is underway. Washington has become our Versailles. The media has evolved into a class of courtiers. The Democrats, like the Republicans, are courtiers. Our pundits, academic experts, and financial analysts, at least those with prominent public platforms, are courtiers. And we are captivated by the hollow stagecraft of political theater as we are ruthlessly stripped of power. Being a courtier requires agility and eloquence, and the most talented of them should be credited as persuasive actors. They entertain us. They make us feel good. They are the smiley faces of a corporate state. But when the corporations make their iron demands, these courtiers drop to their knees. They placate the telecommunications companies that want to be protected from lawsuits. They permit oil and gas companies to rake in obscene profits and keep in place vast subsidies of corporate welfare. They allow our for-profit driven healthcare system to leave the uninsured and underinsured to suffer and die. And over 40,000 Americans died last year because they could not get proper medical care. The for-profit healthcare industry, like the defense industry, makes money from death and suffering. It is legally permitted in this country to hold a sick child hostage while their families frantically bankrupt themselves to save their sons or daughters. Any discussion of health care should acknowledge the fact that our for-profit healthcare system is the problem and must be destroyed. Only then can we have an honest debate about what comes next. But this will never happen. It will never happen because the industry's money and lobbyists drive the discussion, as well as the shape of the so-called health care reform bill. America is devolving into a third world nation, and if we do not immediately halt our elites' rapacious looting of the public treasury and our bizarre state socialism for corporations, we will be left with trillions in debts which can never be repaid, and widespread human misery which we will be helpless to ameliorate. Tens of millions of people, brutally controlled, will live in perpetual poverty, a state of neo-feudalism. This is the inevitable result of unchecked corporate capitalism. In his book, The Great Transformation, written in 1944, Karl Polanyi laid out the devastating consequences, the depressions, wars, and inevitable totalitarianism that grow out of a so-called self-regulated free market. Polanyi grasped that fascism, like socialism, was rooted in a market society that refused to function. He warned that a financial system always devolved without heavy government control into a mafia capitalism and a mafia political system. A self-regulated market inevitably turns human beings as well as the natural environment into commodities, a situation that ensures the destruction of both society and the natural world. The free market's assumption that nature and human beings are objects whose worth is determined by the market allows each to be exploited for profit until exhaustion or collapse. A society that no longer recognizes that nature and human life have a sacred dimension, an intrinsic value beyond monetary value, commits collective suicide. Such societies cannibalize themselves until they die. We have been borrowing at a rate of more than $2 billion a day over the last 10 years, and at some point, it has to end. By 2010, because of the bailouts, stimulus packages, giveaways, and short-term debt, we will have to finance $5 trillion in debt. That is about $96 billion in debt auctioned off every week. If China and the oil-rich states do not buy this debt, the buyer of last resort will be the Federal Reserve. And this will have the effect of essentially printing endless amounts of money. Our currency, at this point, will become junk. A furious and sustained backlash, which we can already see leaping up around the fringes of American society, will be sustained by a betrayed and angry populace, one unprepared intellectually, emotionally, and psychologically for collapse. This populist revolt will sweep aside the Democrats and most of the Republicans. It was the economic collapse in Yugoslavia that gave us Slobodan Milosevic. It was the Weimar Republic that vomited up Adolf Hitler. And it was the breakdown in Tsarist Russia that opened the door for Lenin and the Bolsheviks. A cabal of proto-fascist misfits, from Christian demagogues to loudmouth talk show hosts who we naively dismiss as buffoons, will find a following with promises of revenge, moral renewal, and new glory. How will we cope with our decline? Will we cling to the absurd dreams of an imperial superpower and the fantasies of a glorious tomorrow? Or will we responsibly face our stark new limitations? Will we heed those who are sober and rational, those who speak of a new simplicity and humility in an age of imperial as well as material decline? Or will we follow the demagogues and charlatans who rise up in moments of crisis and panic? Will we radically transform our society to one that protects the ordinary citizen and fosters the common good, that defies the corporate state, that dismantles empire? Or will we employ the brutality and technology of our internal security and surveillance apparatus to crush dissent and drive us into a new dark age? Social and political reform never comes from accommodating the power structure. It comes from frightening it. The Liberty Party, which fought slavery, the suffragists who battled for women's rights, the labor movement and the civil rights movements knew that the question, as Karl Popper wrote, was not, how do we get good people to rule? Most of those attracted to power are at best mediocrities and often venal. But how do we limit the damage the powerful do to us? These mass movements were the real engines for social reform, the correctives to our democracy, and the true protectors of the rights of citizens. They never achieved formal political power, but they are a reminder that, as Studs Terkel used to say, hope has never trickled down. It has always sprung up. We must opt out of the mainstream. We must articulate and stand firmly and unequivocally, even if this turns us at first into outcasts, on the side of working men and women. We must no longer be content with the crumbs tossed to us by the power elite in the vain hope that accommodation will work. We must become as militant as those who are seeking our enslavement. If we remain passive, we will soon be engulfed by a ruthless, totalitarian capitalism. If we remain passive as we undergo the largest transference of wealth upwards in American history, we will become serfs. If we fight back, we have a chance. The saturation coverage of Jackson's death was yet another example of our collective flight into illusion. It deflected the moral questions arising from mounting injustice, growing inequalities, costly imperial wars, economic collapse, and political corruption. As we sink into an economic and political morass, as we barrel towards a crisis that will create more misery than the Great Depression, we remain controlled, manipulated, and distracted by the celluloid shadows on the wall of Plato's cave. The fantasy of celebrity culture is not designed simply to entertain. It is designed to drain us emotionally, confuse us about our identity, blame ourselves for our predicament, condition us to chase illusions of unachievable fame and happiness, and keep us from fighting back. And in the end, that is all the Jackson coverage was really about. Another tawdry and tasteless spectacle to divert a dying culture from the baying wolf at the gate. Thank you.
Chris, I suspect that in the 17th century that you alluded to, the end of a classic American Jeremiad, it was sometimes hard for the congregants to know where the preacher was suggesting that hope might be placed. Not in princes, not in delusions, not in the industry of happiness psychology that you so trenchantly analyze in your book. I think they probably had to listen between the lines and to the end, the way I did when I read your book. I found one of the most poignant moments actually in the endnotes, where you express your gratitude to your one-time teacher and mentor at Colgate, Coleman Brown, the Reverend Coleman Brown. And you say that he always directed you beyond your own despair to look deeply enough to see in humankind the potential, the hope for some further good. Tell us a little more about where to look.
I think the failure of the American left is due to two crucial mistakes. The first is that it's not our job to achieve formal political power. It's our job to stand fast with a moral imperative in the way that all the great reformers in society did. And most of them began as very isolated, marginal, and often ridiculed figures. And I think the second mistake is to succumb to a kind of practicality whereby we judge the efforts that we make in the fight for justice by what we see around us. And this is the strength of the religious left, figures like Dorothy Day, Martin Luther King, is that we have to, I think, finally find within us the strength or the faith to believe that what we are doing while it may not transform society or the world in our lifetime, nevertheless has a kind of a power that often we don't recognize in the moment. I spent almost 2 decades as a war correspondent, and I watched figures stand up in El Salvador, Oscar Romero being one, or in the Balkans, and the ability, even for a sole individual, to express another way of being, to nurture a community. In the wars in Yugoslavia, when they began, the first people killed were not the opposing warlord or leader of the other ethnic group, but that within your own community who still had Muslim friends or Croat friends or Serb friends, who defied that narrative of hate. And the situation that we face is very bleak. We lack the tools to disrupt the rape of the nation by the corporate state. Labor unions are a spent force. Our political system has become, I think, as Sheldon Woolen correctly points out, a system of inverted totalitarianism. Our press, certainly our responsible print press, is dying. Resistance in many ways will be local. And I think that we'll have to find sustenance in a belief that no matter how bleak it gets, that act of resistance, that ability to retain our integrity, is in and of itself a victory. During the war in the Balkans, where there were horrific acts of genocide, I and other journalists, at some risk, would walk into towns where the Serbs had carried out massacres, whether in Kosovo or whether in Bosnia. They would cut the roads. We would have to go in the back way with our satellite phones, report on what had happened, and file those stories. Certainly, it didn't stop them from carrying out a massacre the next day. But each act like that, each act that broke from the abstract sort of despair that comes with viewing the genocide at large, was one that I think empowered us to go from one day to a next. And no act of resistance is futile. It's when you give in to cynicism or when you give in to despair that you die. You die morally, you die spiritually. I think the great writers of spiritualism are not those sort of self-help gurus and the narcissism of how is it with us, but people like King or Bonhoeffer, who knew that true spirituality came with that eternal battle for justice.
Welcome back. You heard, this is not about my opinion, this is historical truth. Let me break down this in my own way that I have understood the video, and I think it was a nice video for you to watch because from the very beginning, slavery, Jim Crow, redlining and everything, black labor built white wealth. That cotton, sugar, railroads, black people provided the backbone, and white America cashed in big and bigger. It didn't stop there. The system just evolved from one to another because, for example, when you talk about colonization in Africa and then the colonizer went, it didn't just stop there. The system just shifted gears from gear 1 to gear 2 to gear 5. Now it is being done in another way. In this case, the system created entire industries of black suffering. I'm talking about America. Prisons filled with black bodies, and that's free labor and billion-dollar contracts. Because when you're in prison, you work for free. You work for the government, and the government is cashing in everything. Policing, constant surveillance in our communities, job security for white officers. You get that? Everything the system does, it is cashing in. It is profiting in. When they do they open prisoners for black people. When they open prison, black people work in. They're there. When they do policing, surveillance in black neighborhood and everywhere. For example, like the other day where Donald Trump said he's going to provide black people with security that they need it. We don't need security, but here it's creating jobs for white security officer. when you go in education, keep black people or keep black kids under re-educated, undereducated, and they feed the low wage economy. You get that? Restriction of black kids getting quality education so that to make them working in low wages because you don't own certificate, you don't qualify. That is a strategy. And if you're black, you must see this, a long-term strategy. When you complain about the black neighborhood having undereducated or the system of education system is poor and blah, 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 this is a structure, is a pattern to make sure that black kids will remain undereducated so that to lack that quality and to work in low wage economy. Black pain isn't an accident, it is profitable. And that's why black people, we ask yourself, why are black people always complaining and suffering every time? I see other races, I see other groups like Latinos, Asians saying that we came here to America, we have made it. And why black people haven't made it? Africans are saying that because the pain and the struggle of black Americans is what is benefiting America. The pain and struggle of a black American is what is benefiting African in diaspora. The pain of black American is what it's benefiting Asian Americans and Latino Americans and white Americans at large. It is a strategy, it is a plan, and it is what it is. Now, let's talk about Michael Jackson. The professor explained it best using Michael. Michael wasn't just a pop star, he was a black brilliance wrapped in unmatched talent. He was great. For all who listened and watched Michael Jackson, they know how he was talented. But what did the industry do? They used him. Sony made billions from his voice, his image, his sweat. If you're familiar with the entertainment industry, you know what I'm talking about. Billions of money from his voice, his sweat. But when he wanted ownership, when he bought the Beatles catalog or the Beatles catalog, when he wanted to own his own masters, what happened? Suddenly he became a threat. Suddenly they attacked him in the media, allegation, lies, character assassination, and everything. Are you getting what I'm trying to say here? The same industry that crowned him, the same industry that ate from his sweat, are the one who turned on him, are the one who said this and that about Michael Jackson. Even in death, Michael still generates hundreds of millions. Even right now, his music is still paying off. His image is still paying off up to now. But where does that money go? Not to the black community, not to his family, but to white-controlled companies. They extracted his value and erased the man. They erased the man, and that's why they are doing every day, erasing our history. For those who don't understand what I'm trying to talk is that the white companies are still eating from Michael Jackson's voice, but the man is not there. He died with a lot of allegations, trying to erase his history. Now, and it's not just Michael Jackson. We have a lot. All icons, all exploited. Tupac, Whitney Houston, Prince, a lot of icons, all dead too young. This one called the Prince literally wrote the word slave on his face because he knew the game. He was fighting for control of his music, his legacy, and how did this portray him? Difficult, unstable, eccentric. Now, listen to me here. They won't allow, or they didn't allow him to own his music. They didn't allow any of these icons that I've named to own anything. They wanted to control him, and that's why Prince wrote on his face slave. Because word slave, because he knew what was going on in the background. And that is the script always. Now, it is a script now, tomorrow, and the other day. It doesn't change. It doesn't change at all. Colin Kaepernick kneeled peacefully for black lives, and the NFL turned him into a villain. I know you know that person. Yet they still profit off black players, black talent, black trauma. Look at the NBA, the NFL, majority black players, majority white owners. In this NFL and NBA, you don't see a lot of white players there. It's only black players. When you go to these short distance athletes, black players. But who are the owners? Are the white owners. Now, This is like the new plantation. If I may give that example, black workers, white owners. The profit goes to the white owners. A lot of profit, while the black workers are being paid a little. It is just different uniform, but same structure. You understand that? Let's talk about culture. Black creativity fuels the world. That is true. Starting with the music, we go to the fashion, slang, swag. It has fueled the world. We innovate, they imitate, and then they monetize it. And they don't pay us even a dime. They don't do that. TikTok is a perfect example. If I have to give example, black teens invent a dance and then poop, white teens get brands, deals, interviews, TV shows, because they have just copied the dance and do it as they are doing. Africans creating a dance on viral something, and white people enjoying from it. They get rich of our rhythm, but ignore us. They get rich of our rhythm, but they ignore our blues. Pros on black girls and professional, but cornrows on white influencers. It is trendy. Big lips, dark skin, thick calves used to be ridiculed. Now, it is an Instagram goal. Now, they look, but not the life that comes with it. They enjoy our music, but they don't want to associate with our pain. They don't want to fight for us. They don't want to accept that of our pain, our struggle. They don't know how this has come from. They're just listening to hip-hop, enjoying the hip-hop music, but they don't care where it came from. It came from someone in pain, someone living in pain. So it is not cultural appreciation, it is extraction, it is theft. Our black culture have made the white people so rich. Our music culture has made them so rich. Our everything we are doing, it is profitable to them. But to us as black people, we don't gain anything from it. Even from Africa, see our Nigerian musicians, their music is being profited back there. And that's why these companies, Sony's and these big music companies, they come and take the big talents in Africa. For example, Burna Boy, South Soul, they own the music for some period of time. They profit from it. This conversation makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But why? It's because it forces the hard truth into the light. It is the hard truth. White America has not only benefited from black suffering, they are dependent on it, or they are depending on it. They are depending on black suffering. And when we demand reparation, they say it is divisive. When you talk about reparation, we talk about everything. We build America. We are still running America. A lot of taxes collected in America is coming from black Americans. It's coming from the struggle of black people. It's coming from the pain of black people. The infrastructure and everything that you think is good in America. Today I had my friend and he saw these Chicago buildings and he was saying, oh, it's looking good. I was like, looking good? We are the one who built this. You want to leave Africa and go there because it's looking good? Let's fight for ours. Let's build ours. Because if we have built it theirs, why can't us build us? Why? I asked one day, imagine what will happen if black Americans and Africans and Caribbeans unite. If Caribbeans build there alone, black Americans build America alone. What happens if we come together? What will happen in Africa where we have everything? When Africans show pride, they call it reverse racism. Calling it reverse racism in South Africa because Africa are now showing pride, owning things. They don't want Africa to own anything. They don't want that. And they want the music, the fashion, the food, the vibe, but not the pain, yeah? Not the history, not engaging in reparation. They don't want accountability, and that's why they erase our voices, rewrite our history, they whitewash everything and silence our rage. But we are here, or we are not here to be silent. We ain't going to be silent. Like, we are here to speak truth to power, So, what do we do with this? We support black businesses. We tell our own stories. We protect our culture. We teach our kids their real history. We unite. We combine forces. That's what we can do. Let's stop letting them profit from our pain, because the truth is white America has made a whole economy out of black trauma. It is time to end the cycle, not with silence, but with strategy, not with rage alone, but with power. And we need to take back what is back, not through violence, but with strategy. Unity is the only way we can do. Thank you for watching my video. If you felt the message, drop a comment below, like, share, and subscribe. Support Black Truth, support Black ownership, support Black channel. This is the Kenyan Beast. Peace, power, and purpose.